Welcome to First Downs and Touchdowns, a new podcast coming from me, your host, Nate Skinner, here with Kadi TV on the first episode, which is pretty special. What's going on?
It's going good, man. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me on, and excited to get right into it.
Oh yeah. Now, what you got going on in your world? Tell us a little bit about what you got going on, what you building on your end for momentum.
So on Rome Kitty TV. I've basically been kind of just using that account as kind of like a professional account because I'm a sports journalism major. Obviously, that's why I'm here. And I want to promote like my broadcast because I want to be play-by-play broadcaster. So I want to promote that, as well as just some hot takes that I have in my mind. For like the NFL season, I'll usually do like a preview of like each division, conference championships, the Super Bowl, all that type of stuff. So expect that coming very, very soon, possibly before the Thursday night game in that one. But yeah, I've just been using that to kind of build my own brand. And yeah, my actual name is Rome Kadi, but my username on Instagram is Rome Kadi TV, obviously, because that's my name, and I want to promote that brand as well. So yeah, it's just been fun over there. I've been conversing with a lot of my friends on there as well, so it's been fun over there for sure.
Well, we're glad to have you on the first episode here. I'm excited. Now, before we get to the NFL talk, we're going to start with some college football news as the new AP poll came out today. Some interesting stuff, but we got to talk about Florida State because this is not going to be hidden. But DJ Uiagalelei, what is the thoughts on what he's done so far, and how do you feel about him?
Yeah, DJU, like, it was crazy because he was so good at Clemson too. I was talking to someone about this like just a little bit ago. Like, he was so good at Clemson, and then he just decided to bounce around to random spots. I mean, no disrespect to Oregon State or Florida State by any means, but like, I don't know if like those are really the places for you to really succeed, especially after what he experienced at Clemson, and especially going down 0-2 in the season to losing to teams like Georgia Tech and Boston College. Like that just shouldn't happen, especially with as good of a coach as Mike Norvell typically is. I'm really shocked he wasn't able to try and guide those guys to a win at least in some point in those two games, or even 2 wins in 2 games. So really disappointing for Mike Norvell and really disappointing for the Seminoles. So we'll see if they can win out, but it's looking like they're already within 2 games done from college football playoff contention, just like that. And that's what happens in college football. You never really know what can happen in terms of who loses out, who wins out. It's just a whole different dice game that's being played right now, and I think they're just on the wrong side of it.
Well, they have Memphis coming up, which you think should be an easy win, but with how the first 2 weeks have gone against Georgia Tech, which was a good game, they were still in it, but they gave up 190-plus yards to Georgia Tech and over 200 to Boston College, which is concerning for the Seminoles, in my opinion, considering that Norvell has built some solid defenses. He has Patrick Payton off the edge. It's concerning. It seems like from national media, it seems like some guys have given up playing for Florida State, in that the guys that left, you had Jordan Travis, who left for the league, who seemed like the glue guy in the locker room. And it's interesting because you expect a guy like DJU, who transferred from Oregon State, to get going, and he hasn't really showed. You will look at Boston College last night. He couldn't hit an open guy in the end zone.
Yeah.
And especially in the ACC, when you're trying to get into the college football playoffs, these losses are huge, and they affect your college football playoff. And the schedule looked easy early on to build momentum, and I don't know how you feel about this, but they had that whole debacle about suing the ACC to leave it. How do you think that affects Florida State and their chances with leaving the ACC now?
I think it definitely diminishes their chances because, I mean, even though they have a great history and they've had great success in the past, right? Like, especially with guys like Jameis Winston coming through the program, Jalen Ramsey on the defensive side of the ball as well. Like, they have some great players that came through that program. And it's just these last 2 games have been just disappointing from there and for obvious reasons, because You're just not getting the production you want. The coaching is obviously not there because, like I said, you expect a guy like Mike Norvell to get the job done and try and rally these guys together and make something happen, but it just was not the case whatsoever. And I think when you don't have those key pieces like a Jordan Travis, like a Keon Coleman, for example, too, like he left last year to the league as well. So when you don't have those guys in that roster, it completely flips the script. And I think you're seeing that right now with guys just trying to gel with what the scheme is. And it's kind of crazy because like the margin for error in college football is so small. Like you lose 1 or 2 games and you're already out of it. And that's what Florida State's unfortunately having to deal with right now. And it's disappointing because they had a great season last year and they just missed out on the college football playoff with the skin in their teeth. And if this 12-team format was the case last year, then they would have easily gotten in. So I think it's just a lot of it's just unluckiness, but a lot of it is just like the fact that they weren't.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because now you're out of the top 25. And now that we're going to take a look here at the top 25, Clemson took a huge loss, 34-3 against Georgia. So now they drop down to 25. You got NC State, Georgia Tech at 23, Louisville after 63-0 loss, or win, I should say. They blew out the other team. It wasn't even close. And you have Iowa, and then to round out 20-25, you have Arizona. Anything particular stick out there?
I think the thing that sticks out to me is Iowa because if you'd have told me coming into the season that a team like Iowa would be not only scoring touchdowns and winning games, but in the top 25 after one game, like kudos to them because like they must have had a whole revamp of that program. All the nepotism allegations had to get removed at some point. Like it wasn't gonna work out for them like it did last year. And I think to see them actually show some improvement and actually show that they're a real college football team that deserves to be in a conference like the Big Ten, it shows a lot. And it's like, okay, like let's see what you can do the rest of the year. Like now will they be like a 5 to 7 win team? Probably. But like this is a good start for them, I think, especially about what Iowa fans have dealt with the last couple of years of just kicking field goals and kicking punts away. Like I'm telling you right now, the kickers and punters have had probably more reps than like some of these quarterbacks and receivers because everything was just 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out last year. And I think when you get more healthy drives down the field and to score points, that's what's obviously going to win you games. And if now that they're able to do that, like they're good for right now. But like I said, they're still not obviously within the same realm as like, Oregon and USC and Miami, Tennessee, like those type of teams. They're obviously not within that, but what to know. Good game last week. Good start. We'll see if they can continue it the rest of the year.
I think Clemson's going to be interesting because it seems like Dabo Swinney may be coming to an end soon. He just hasn't had the production like he used to with guys like Deshaun Watson back in the day, Hunter Renfrow, and DeAndre Hopkins, guys like that coming through. It's just interesting to see where Clemson's at these days. They used to be in the national championship against Bama a lot, and it seems like talent has dropped off. It's interesting to see what Dabo Swinney is going through at a program like that because Klubnik is supposed to be that guy, but hasn't shown much. I even seen a play where linemen are blocking each other on the own Clemson line, which is concerning. I don't know how you feel about Dabo, but is the end coming near for him sooner rather than later?
I think it has to, and I think it's largely because of that bad play that Clemson has right now. And they were, again, I was talking to someone about this today, right? Like they had this era of like premier football being played. Like they were battling with the likes of Alabama. They were when Deshaun Watson and Lamar were still in college, we had some great battles against each other, right? And when you see the fall off that Clemson's been on right now, it just needs to be studied because how can you all of a sudden, like within 7 years, go from one of the top programs in the nation, perennial championship contender, to barely squeaking in the top 25 on a week 2, and your quarterback that was supposed to be a high recruit hasn't played well the last year and a week. So things just need to get changed. I don't know if Dabo needs to get fired. I think he's still a good coach. I think he could still try and rally his guys, but just something needs to change within, whether it's a personnel perspective, whether it's AD perspective, whether it's a player perspective, whatever it is, something needs to change. Like something needs to change fast. I think that's the biggest thing.
Now to highlight 19-11, you got teams like Kansas, LSU, you got Kansas State, Oklahoma, Tennessee, USC, Miami, and Utah. Some great teams fighting for position from 19 to 11 right now. And there's a team in Miami that's going to make some noise. Cam Ward, Heisman potential, coming from Washington State. I was high on him when he transferred to Miami. I know Miami's going to do him right. They absolutely routed Florida in their own stadium for the first time in a while. And another team that sticks out, Tennessee. Their quarterback. He's good too.
Big Nico.
Yeah. Nico. He's there for some good potential, and he could really put Tennessee back on the map. And then I like Kansas. Been a fan of Kansas. If you know the other Jalen Daniels, he's a top tier talent, and he led Kansas to some good wins when he was healthy. The only thing his concern is health. But if he can stay healthy, I could see Kansas sneaking into the top 12 college football playoff in a conference that is wide open. Big 12 is wide open this year, and it's good to see. I think the Big 10 is going to be very competitive. The SEC is going to be competitive. But conferences like the Big 12 and the ACC, those always are the most wide open in college football. And the only one-loss team in the top 25 is LSU after they lost to USC. But in your end, is there anything particular or shocking that sticks out?
I think there's one team that you haven't mentioned, and that's shocking to me, and I think that's USC. When I watched that game against, of course, you talked about USC, LSU. When I watched that game, there's a guy by the name of Miller Moss that really caught my eye. I'm like, this kid's got swagger to him. I don't know if it's like the poise he's got in the pocket. I don't know if he's just got this like moxie about him that just he knows how to make the right plays and the right reads. But this kid's going to be a good college quarterback. Now, I don't know if it's going to translate into the NFL. But, I mean, although after 1 week, like, I'm kind of jumping on the Miller Moss bandwagon here because he did the right thing. He sat back for 2 years and watched Caleb Williams light the world on fire at USC the 2 years that he was there. And the fact that he stayed back, learned the offense, learned what USC Trojan football is like, I think he's as ready as anybody to step into that spot and get the job done. And that's what he proved a Sunday night in Las Vegas, which to me is exciting because to me, I thought USC was just going to go down the drain after Caleb Williams went for the league. And I think when you get a guy like Miller Moss in there, like he's really going to shake it up there. And I think that's what's going to be the key to success for USC. I don't know if they'll make I don't know if they'll make the at-large playoff bids, but you never really know what could happen with a team like USC.
I think LSU is an interesting team, like Clemson. Since that 2019 team full of aura with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson,
the most aura, you could add like 2 million aura to that 2019 LSU team, and you could add more to it, like crazy.
But Brian Kelly, since his arrival, really hasn't done that program well. They've lost the past 5 season openers, and as a team like LSU, they're known to come out and execute, but they have not looked good. And Jaden Daniels is now in Washington, but it's interesting. Where is LSU heading? And Brian Kelly, what's your thoughts on the whole LSU situation? Because it's been interesting for a while now.
Yeah, I mean, that Nussmeier QB was kind of decent last night. I think he really went toe-to-toe with Miller Moss, especially like during that game. But as soon as on their last drive, when they kicked the field goal at the end of the game, I was like, yeah, they're losing that game. And you could see the body language with Grant Nussmeier and Brian Kelly in that entire sideline. Their body language immediately was just, yeah, we're losing this game. And, of course, USC went down, got the game-winning touchdown to win the game. What was interesting to me is at the press conference, Brian Kelly was like, oh, I'm sick and tired of guys having body language, feeling that we're going to lose the game, da-da-da. Like, we got to change that. I'm like, that starts with you, buddy. Because I saw you square in 4K looking like, oh man, they just kicked the field. We couldn't kick a field goal. Like you could just see his face, like, oh man, this is crazy. So like for me, that has to start up top with the coach, I think. And if he's able to set the precedent to the rest of the players, I think they'll be able to find some way to succeed in the future. But I honestly don't know if now is the time for LSU to go into the 12-team playoff this year. I don't think they'll be in there, I think, especially after this loss too. But they can always pick it up. I'm sure they have a decent schedule, but again, it is the SEC. You're going to face really tough teams on pretty much a back-to-back-to-back basis. So to me, I feel like LSU is a bigger question mark than USC to get into the playoff, I think. Especially after the game.
Definitely. Now we're heading to the top 10. Now this is where it's going to get good. We are going to go 10-5, which is really 10-6 because the top 5 is something special and interesting to talk about per usual. But from 10-6, you got teams like Michigan. You got a team like Missouri, Penn State, Oregon, and Ole Miss. But the fact is, Ole Miss played a nobody in Furman. You're supposed to beat a guy like that 76-0. But if there's a team from 10-6 that you have the most worry about, who would be that team?
I think for me, that's probably the easiest question you're ever going to ask me because it's Oregon for me. Like, I thought this team was a top 3 team. You can book it, no questions asked. When you somehow scrape a win against Idaho, like we're talking about Idaho here. Like I'm AI right now. We're really talking about Idaho right now. 24-14, you win that game. Fair, it's a win. Okay, sure. But you need to do what Ole Miss did and run the score up on Idaho. Like you can't possibly tell me that they only won by 10 points against a team like Idaho. You're just not supposed to do that, especially if you are a championship contending team that was just off the heels of a great season from Bo Nix, their quarterback, last year. And they had a great year in the last year of the Pac-12. Barely got in the playoff. Missed out because they were in the Fiesta Bowl. But it's just, I really do have faith in Oregon, though, because they do have a good quarterback in Dylan Gabriel that is a Heisman hopeful, I think, still. And Dan Lanning's still a really, really good coach, so I have no problems with that. But especially, I think the worry part for me with Oregon is, like, how do you only win that game by 10 points? Especially with Dylan Gabriel playing lights out, it was really just penalties and mistakes. And that could easily be cleaned up. It just depends on whether or not those linemen, offensive and defensive linemen, want to fix those penalty yardage at some point.
I think one to watch, though, which isn't too concerning at the moment, but a little bit, is Michigan. What can Alex Orji do to help that program succeed post J.J. McCarthy, post Harbaugh? I think Michigan's on watch, but I definitely agree with you. Oregon barely escaping the grips of Idaho is concerning, especially when you have a guy like Evan Stewart transfer from Texas A&M to come to you. You have a guy like Tez Johnson, who is fantastic. He'll probably be drafted next year and be in the first round, early second round guy. But when you have Dylan Gabriel as a Heisman quarterback and with guys like that catching the ball from him, there is no excuse not to beat a team like Idaho 35-3, 63-0. It shows that Idaho may have good coaching more than we think, or they're shifting their program, but it should not matter because when Oregon is a top-tier team, they should not run into difficulty with the team like Idaho. You have to use your skill guys, and you really have to prove that you are a top 4 team. Now, everyone was saying Oregon top 4, automatic, like you were saying, and to come out like that and now you drop down to 6 or 7, it's concerning because if you're going backwards, not backwards in a bad way, but if the national media is going to look at you seriously, you have to beat some unserious teams like Idaho. Not that Idaho is an unserious team, but when it comes to big powerhouse teams, they are pretty unserious.
Unserious is the word, brother.
Now we get to the top 5, which this is a good top 5. It's an interesting top 5. A lot of good things to talk about. We're going to go with 5. You have Notre Dame. At 4, you have Alabama. At number 3, you have Texas, Ohio State at 2, and the Georgia Bulldogs still staying at number 1 these days, a majority of the time. They're just hard to beat these days. And shout out Kirby Smart, who's a protege of Nick Saban back in the day. Look at what he can do with his own program consistently day in and day out. But what's interesting about that top 5? Anything that is burning the page up where you're like, ooh, that's something to watch, or ooh, trouble brewing? What you think of the top 5 of college football right now?
I think the top 5 is very interesting. I think, Georgia, they're of course just going to be a dominant team that are just going to run through the regular season regardless of whether there's conference realignment or not. They're going to do what they're going to do. When you have a team like Ohio State in there too, like I didn't really watch that game, but I'm sure they played great. They deserve that number 2 spot. Okay, sure. Texas and Alabama to me is very interesting because especially when you have a Texas team that basically has a quarterback by committee, if you want to call it that, with Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning as that tandem at the quarterback spot. And you have great skill weapons across the board and a decent defense from what I've heard. Like, I mean, it doesn't even have to matter about the skill guys and defense because Quinn Ewers can just take this team to where they want to go. You know what I mean? Like, he's that type of quarterback to where, like, if he pops off and has a breakout year, he's going to be top 3 highs and maybe even win the thing. He's going to be a top draft pick whenever he decides to declare for the draft. Like, he already has that. So what he needs to do is just do what he needs to do, have a great year, propel your team to the playoff, and then just kind of go like on a run. Like that's what you want if you're Texas, especially when you come down to within the last play of a team like UW last year. Like, I think you need to take that motivation with you and just let it run. And I think this team has a good shot at doing that. And then even Alabama with Jalen Milroe, like, he is a dog, man. Like, you're telling me a dude had like 5 touchdowns last game. Like, he played great. The team played great. Of course, it was Western Kentucky. Again, you're supposed to beat them. But like, Jalen Milroe is that guy. When he's given opportunities to go, he can go. And then Notre Dame at 5 is kind of interesting to me because I'm just weirded out by it because I don't know if it's just me not seeing Notre Dame at top 5 conversations that often, but I'm like, I don't know if they should be in there. I mean, granted, they did have a great win against, I think it was A&M. Yeah, A&M. Riley Leonard's a great transfer. Former ASU guy Jordan Clark transferred over there, of course.
Clark's son, former Steelers.
Yeah, Ryan Clark's son. Yeah, Steelers guy. Yep, the paths are connecting for sure. I think when you look at a team like Ole Miss too, like, I've watched this guy backseat coach. I think he's a college football playoff content creator. I'm not sure if you guys follow him out there, but please do if you like college football. He's a great guy to follow. He's a guy that's really high on Ole Miss, and I'm like, let me investigate a little bit and see what this Ole Miss team is about. I mean, they got a guy like Jackson Dart who can light the world on fire at the quarterback position. Like, he's obviously gonna be up there for Heisman. Of course, you got their coach Lane Kiffin, who's one of the best coaches in the game still, even though he's a wacky character, he's still a great coach. So it's just, for me, it's just, I feel like, I don't know, maybe just, it might be a me thing, but like, I'm just not used to seeing Notre Dame top 5, honestly.
I think the Notre Dame thing is interesting because Riley Leonard didn't put on anything eye-popping against Texas A&M. 18 of 30 or 31 for 158 yards and no touchdowns. Granted, Jeremiah Love, fantastic runner as a running back. But you got to look at Notre Dame's secondary. They have guys like Xavier Watts, Christian Gray. They have a corner next year that's supposed to be in the draft. His name's slipping my mind at the moment, but he is fantastic.
Must we forget Jordan Clark is there too? I got to name drop him again.
But the secondary for Notre Dame came up clutch against Texas A&M, getting 2 picks. And that's something interesting to put in the top 5. But I think when you look at Ole Miss, there's a good debate between Notre Dame and Ole Miss. Ole Miss, they might have lost Judkins, but they did recruit well. You have guys like a Trey Harris who's supposed to come along this year with Jackson Dart. It's just interesting. I know they played Furman, so you kind of want to keep them until they play someone real.
Mm-hmm.
But Notre Dame facing Texas A&M, getting a ranked game in. I think that's what overall elevated them to number 5. But we got to talk about Alabama for a second because Ryan Williams, circle that name, 17 years old. He's supposed to be a high school senior right now, and he comes out and balls. He originally decommitted, had rumors of Auburn maybe, but he comes to Alabama and he shows that they still haven't lost their wide receiver order. How many wide receivers have we seen as of late come out of Alabama? Guys like Jalen Waddle. You have Jamison Williams, like even if he's not big in the league, they produce NFL talent at the wide receiver position. But Keon Sabb, Michigan transfer that goes to Alabama, gets 2 picks, and it's an upgrade over Malachi Moore. Malachi Moore, he's been consistent the years he's been there, but you could tell after watching last year that in the back end that Alabama needed a safety. After losing Caleb Downs to Ohio State, you need to go out in the transfer portal and get a guy. And Keon Sabb, fantastic in coverage. He can cover over the top and just make plays. And to lose Caleb Downs and guys from your team that were part of the Saban era, but to still come out and still produce under Kalen DeBoer, which is a great pickup for Bama. It's interesting to see how can Bama build momentum. I'm not sure how you feel about Bama after game 1, but it's interesting. What do you think Bama has to prove post Nick Saban era year 1?
I think for Alabama, right, like they just need to try and find their mojo, because I think if, like I mentioned before with Jalen Milroe, right, like he can really put the team on his back and really do what he needs to do. I think it's just the rest of that team really just coming together, and especially being motivated after losing Nick Saban and losing the Rose Bowl in the semifinals last year. Like that has to amount for some type of motivation to get this team back to where it needs to be for them, I guess. And, you know, it could be interesting to see how this new era of Alabama kind of shakes up. But again, I think Jalen Milroe will take this team as far as it wants to go. And if it means a 9-win team, a 10-win team, cool. But like, it's kind of an unsuccessful year, especially with Kalen DeBoer starting his tenure at Alabama as well. So you never really know what to expect. I mean, we'll see what they can conjure up in the future.
Yeah, it's college football is very unpredictable. It's good to see how much changes in a week with the new AP polls. But as we say, anyone can get upset any week. You never know. But do you have a team or two in the top 25 to watch that you would put a star next to be like, maybe they can cause ruckus in the rankings?
I mean, I got 2 off the rip. I look at Miami at 12 and I look at USC at 13. I talked about USC already, Miller Moss. Like, that guy's controlled. He knows what he's doing. Like, he can be able to go on a run this year and try and get this USC team back to the playoff. I mean, you mentioned Miami with Cam Ward. Like, that dude is a dog in every sense of the word. Like, that dude was just – I was watching highlight tapes. I'm like, how in the world does he do half of the stuff that he did in that game? Like, that's just unbelievable to me. And the craziest part about it was, I don't know if you knew this, but like at the end of the game, the Miami players were walking out the field talking trash to the Florida recruits, like, don't come here, come to Miami. Like, that was a really fire thing that they did. I mean, not like necessarily like cool with like Florida, I guess, but like to try and get some type of like negotiations to go your way, especially with the school like Miami, who's fantastic in the 2000s, one of the greatest programs we've ever seen, go on a complete hiatus for like 10, 15 years, and then now they're starting to slowly come back into prominence again. Like, a guy like Cam Ward is going to try and get that done for your team. And, you know, like I said about Milroe, who knows where Cam Ward can take this team and push them to wherever they want to go. And then I think, you know, Tennessee as well, like with Big Nico, Ayamaleva, I think I said. I was
Lamalea or whatever. Lamalea.
Yeah, Ayamaleva, yeah, something like that. But yeah, Nico's killing it for them this year. Like, he was a highly touted recruit coming out of high school, was committed to them for a couple years, and now he's making his debut, and he's really showing why he's one of the top quarterbacks in the league. Like, I think those 3 teams for me, I would circle as really good teams to watch out for. But, you know, you never really know how the rest of the season could go.
I think what's interesting is, as much as Bama is number 4 team in the country. I like Tennessee in an upset, October 19th. I like Bama. I'm a Bama guy. I'll root for them because, that's what I grew up on. But what's interesting is Nico has an arm. He has the talent. It's not Joe Milton back there worrying about the running. Nico can sling the rock around the field. He even proved it. As much as this was just a warm-up game for Tennessee, he showed his talent, his big arm, how he can fit the ball into small spaces, which is very difficult for any QB that's trying to go to the NFL because sometimes spaces close faster than you think. But I like Tennessee, and I'm a big Miami guy. I truly believe that they will make it to the ACC championship. And as bold as that sounds, we're going to let it ride because to get a talent like Cam Ward after not much going on at the quarterback position the past couple of years, but to get a guy like Cam Ward who came out and said, this is my city, not literally, but he came out and played like that. You got a guy like Xavier Restrepo at wide receiver who's a talent in the NFL future. I like Miami in the ACC, but I could see Tennessee making some noise in the SEC because they didn't drop off. They lost Joe Milton. They lost who's that Lions quarterback now that was at Tennessee year before. Was supposed to be Heisman. I can't think of the name.
Yeah, I can't think of the name either.
But we gonna look this up.
You might have to do some research on that. But yeah, I mean, they're looking pretty good right now, I'd say.
Because you got to think about it. The Tennessee quarterbacks, they still have some good guys that are in the NFL. Joe Milton's literally on the Patriots.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have Hendon Hooker. That's who I was thinking.
Oh, yeah, Hendon Hooker. Yeah.
He was supposed to have a Heisman season that year before the ACL injury versus South Carolina. That was a huge game that year because it was back and forth. Can't forget Hendon Hooker. If you see this Hendon Hooker, I'm sorry I forgot your name. It wasn't personal. I'm just trying to process sports through the mind of Nate Skinner here.
You know what? Hey, you know what? I process sports through the mind of Rome Kadi as well. I'm right there with you, bud. Right there with you.
But now we're going to take some NFL coverage because there's a lot of interesting games going on this week. Starting a couple days from now, you have the Ravens at the Chiefs, AFC Championship rematch. Where do you see that game going? Low scoring, high scoring, mid scoring?
Man, it could go in so many different ways. Like, both teams are so much fun, even though, like, Ravens did lose a couple pieces, like J.K. Dobbins, like Gus Edwards, to the Chargers, ironically, because went from Harbaugh to Harbaugh. But, like, I mean, Lamar's still there. Like, he's just a one-man wrecking crew. And now you add a guy like Derrick Henry to that running attack that was already sound in the world before that. Now you bring a guy like him that's just going to wreck the game with his stiff arming the entire team. Like, his right arm is just game-breaking in and of itself. Like, he just carries the ball in his left arm and just slaps defenders away with his right arm, and he just wins the game off of his right arm. Like, I've never seen someone have a body part that wins them a game like their arm does. It's crazy. And then especially when you have a team like the Chiefs, too, back-to-back Super Bowls, 3 out of the last 4 years. They're a dynasty. It's been written in the stars for years now. I mean, of course, you got, Patrick Mahomes back, you got Kelsey back, you got, all that stuff. And then they got Xavier Worthy, that guy who ran the, 4.240 record. Like, he's ridiculous. Like, if you're telling me that they're like creating in the cauldron another Tyreek Hill off the rip, then it's just done for everybody. Especially when you have a guy like Hollywood Brown coming in too as one of their good receivers as well. Like, he could cause some havoc as well against his former team in the Ravens. So I don't know where this could go. It could. I think it's gonna be a duel between Lamar and Pat. I think it's gonna go back and forth the whole time. And I think because I think it's gonna be high scoring, and I think I still have the Chiefs winning that game. I think they're gonna just barely squeak out. I think Butker's gonna kick the game-winning field goal. Let's just say the score is like 41-38, Chiefs win the game. Like, that's kind of where I see this going. And, I mean, Pat and Lamar just light up the world and begin their seasons on a high note, especially individually. So, we'll see how that plays out. It's going to be a really, really exciting game to watch for sure.
What's interesting from this game is both teams have lost a key player on that defense. Chiefs, they traded L'Jarius Sneed to the Titans.
Mm-hmm.
And then my boy Patrick Queen, you know what I mean? I think the defenses will struggle game one because both have lost at least one big playmaker on that side. L'Jarius Sneed, how crucial he is to that secondary. Even though they have a guy like Trent McDuffie, who is a stud, Trent McDuffie is very locked down. I think you gotta see who is going to fill in on L'Jarius Sneed's side because that trade to Tennessee was interesting. And even L'Jarius Sneed came out and he said, "I'm mad that they traded me," but it's an interesting situation to see which defense will make that game-changing play. Because I think that's what it's going to come down to when you're playing two MVP caliber quarterbacks in Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes is which defense is going to make that game-changing turnover, goal line stand, fourth down stop. It's interesting. Now, I really think that the Ravens can do a 31-24 win. It's just you have that read option with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. And
who do you game plan for is my question. On that running attack, who do you game plan for? Because you have Derrick Henry's right arm winning you ball games, and then you have Lamar Jackson's juke moves getting past everybody to win you games too. It's basically pick your poison. You just have to pick the better one, essentially.
A guy I'm willing to watch in that Ravens backfield last year, he did get injured, but I'm willing to see how Keaton Mitchell can fill in at the running back 2 position because last year he showed some promise.
Yeah.
But to be mentored by a guy like Derrick Henry who can help him figure some things out, it will be good to see how Keaton Mitchell can fill in things after coming out of East Carolina University. But we're going to head to the first Brazil game in the NFL. Hear what Darius Slayton said?
No, I haven't.
Why would the NFL send us to a place with high crime rates?
That's terrible. Why would you say that, first of all? Because it doesn't apply to anything. It's just football in Brazil. Let's relax a second with that, first of all.
But what do you when I look at this game for the Eagles, they have to come out swinging. You have Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, Jalen Hurts. You want to talk about another read option tough to stop? Let's head into that backfield of the Eagles having Saquon Barkley and a big quarterback in Jalen Hurts. That's tough to stop in itself. But to have two preliminary wide receivers in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith with a slot option now, get this, Jahan Dotson, who can play the slot for them.
Straight.
To better that receiving core on 3 levels, not just A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, but to get a guy who was former teammates with Saquon Barkley at Penn State in the slot who isn't bad. They're having Dan Quinn's having his own party over there in Washington right now, as I like to say. But what do you watch for in this game? Jordan Love?
I don't know if I'm watching Jordan Love. No disrespect to Jordan Love. I've slowly gotten to understand him, especially last year he played really well. But I'm not watching Jordan Love in this game. I'm watching Jalen Hurts. I'm watching Saquon Barkley. I'm watching A.J. Brown. I'm watching Devonta Smith. I'm watching those 4 guys and that offense just light up that Packers defense in Brazil. That's going to be fun. But I think in the short term, it's going to be fun. But in the long term, that defense is really, it's really just, I have so many questions about that defense because it wasn't great last year. And, you add Cooper DeJean in the draft. Cool, I guess. That's a cool pick. But
and Quinion Mitchell. You can't forget about Quinion Mitchell out of Toledo that they were able to snag, too. To get 2.
Yeah, I heard he was a really, really good corner in the combine, too. I heard he did really well.
Toledo product right there.
Yeah.
You get Cooper DeJean and you get Quinion Mitchell, 2 young corners for that secondary, which should help. Yeah. I think it's going to help the Eagles. You're not going to have the coordinator problems, hopefully, that you did last year.
That's Trevor Moore, that OC spot is nice. He's going to be good for that team for sure. Even though it didn't work out in Dallas or the Chargers or anything like that, I think with his schematically his style will kind of cater to that read option play that Jalen Hurts and that offense likes to run. But I even though you brought up DeJean and Mitchell, I still feel like that defense has a lot of questions and still a lot of things to figure out. I think, and if they're able to show me like, okay, this defense is somewhat good, they can hold off of a decent offense with Jordan Love and a Josh Jacobs, who they picked up in free agency too, which was a nice pickup for them as well. I think for me, it just comes down to whether that defense can make plays and actually be on par or at least a little bit below that high-powered offense that they have. Like, I feel like for the Eagles to succeed, they need to be an evenly like great team, because I feel like they were great on offense last year and they're obviously brilliant on offense this year. But I think if that defense matches up even a slight bit, like this team is going to be scary to play, especially towards, the first round of the playoffs, and you're playing at the Link and it gets loud, it gets feisty. Of course, Philly fans bring the energy regardless of where it is. And yeah, I wouldn't want to play them if that defense plays well. But it really goes, that whole defense is the X factor, because if they don't play well, it's just a one-dimensional team and it's easy to game.
What would be your score prediction for that game?
For this game?
Yeah, Packers-Eagles.
I think Eagles take this one 24-17. I think it's going to be a mid-scoring game. I think, Jordan Love gets out on a hot streak, drives down the field for a couple scores, and then that high-powered offense of the Eagles just really starts to pick it up towards the later part of the game, and that's what gets it done for them. So, we'll see if that actually comes to fruition or not, but, it should be interesting to watch.
I could see this being a 24-20 game where the Eagles defense comes up with a crucial stop, because as young and as good as that Packers offense is starting to get, where they do have options. The Packers just aren't on the Eagles' levels offensively, but they do have some guys. I mean, they picked up Josh Jacobs. Maybe he can revamp, possibly. They have a guy emerging in Jaden Reed. They have Romeo Doubs, who's good. They have Dontavius Wicks, who's been coming into his own over training camp. I just don't know if they're on the level of the Eagles, and I think that's why they're going to fall short in that fourth quarter trying to get a game-winning score, because I think the Eagles are just too much. The Eagles may blow them out for all we know, but I could see the Packers putting up a fight, because there's a lot to prove for that team. And now another game that we're going to look at, Texans Colts, 1 p.m. on Sunday. What a great game. Starting up, Anthony Richardson, C.J. Stroud, Shane Steichen, D'Amico Ryans. How are we feeling about that game? That is marquee TV right there when it comes to two young quarterbacks.
It's marquee TV when it comes to two young quarterbacks, but I feel like in terms of the teams individually, the Texans are far and away a better team than the Colts are, I think. And although that Colts defense is good, like they still have DeForest Buckner, they still have Kenny Moore, they still have that great stout defense that they have. I mean, it's really just AR-15 needs to stay healthy. If he's not healthy, this team is going to be a below 500 team again. And that's what you don't want to see if you're a Colts fan, because this team is good, but this Texans team is ridiculous. I mean, you got C.J. Stroud. They picked up Joe Mixon in free agency. Like, people sleep on Joe Mixon. Like, he can go get in the end zone for scores if you need it. I mean, they got Stephon Diggs to pair up with Nico Collins and Tank Dell, and then Noah Schultz at the tight end spot. Are you serious? Like, that offense in itself is ridiculous, first of all. And on the defensive end, Jimmy Ward is a sneaky pickup for them, too. He's been a great safety for a number of years. He's been doing some solid stuff over in San Francisco in that defense when he was there for a number of years. And Danielle Hunter off the rush. Like, where does the questions end for this team? I think the biggest question for me, though, with this team is C.J. Stroud has to prove that he's not going to go in a sophomore slump. And I think that's the thing that's really going to make or break the success of this team this year. Because, yeah, you got all these guys that come together and just go, all of a sudden we're winning now because we won the division off of a Cinderella season last year, and C.J. Stroud lit the world on fire. But if C.J. Stroud can prove that he's not a one-hit wonder, that he can respond, that he can lead his team to better outcomes than they did last year, like, there's no telling where this team could go. And I think that's a really good thing if you're a team like the Texans, if you're a coach like D'Amico Ryans. It's going to be really fun to watch this team go and watch C.J. Stroud just throw beautiful deep balls to Dell, Collins, and Diggs. That's going to be a fun team to watch. I don't think people are giving them enough credit for how good they are.
I think the Colts, an interesting thing. Shane Steichen, he is one of the greatest offensive minds behind Kyle Shanahan and a couple other people in the league. But Shane Steichen, he was a part of that Eagles Super Bowl team. We got to give him credit for that. And it's just interesting. Can Anthony Richardson stay healthy? Because last year, he get injured, be healthy, get injured again, which ended up being his shoulder. How healthy? The Colts season depends on the health of Anthony Richardson. As much as Joe Flacco is great insurance policy, you have to see what you can get out of Anthony Richardson before you have to dig into the pile of more young quarterbacks. And that's why I think the Colts, as much as their defense can hold them up for so long, I could see the Texans 34 points on their head, because who do you game plan for realistically? Who do you double team? And how do you fill the run gap? You have just so much talent between Mixon, Dell. You have Stephon Diggs, Dalton Schultz, who's an underrated tight end in the league, in my opinion. And it's just that Texans team will outpower the Colts over. I could see this game being like 34-14, 17. I just think the Texans are going to control this game, and they should, unless CJ Stroud just doesn't come out right and starts that sophomore slump earlier than we think. But it's so hard for him to go into a sophomore slump, especially when you got talent like that around you. I think an interesting game also to highlight in the 1 p.m. is the Jaguars and the Dolphins. Battle in Florida, Jacksonville, and you have Miami. Trevor Lawrence versus Tua Tagovailoa, who just got his new contract. There's a lot to expect out of Tua here, getting that big bag that he was demanding for. What are you watching for in that game? What storyline or storylines stick out to you within that game?
I think the biggest storyline for me is the Dolphins need to prove that they're a real playoff team, because that offense is great. I mean, Tua, Mostert, and Achane by committee at the running back spot, and then Tyreek Hill, Waddle, and OBJ in the slot. Like, are you serious? Like, that's the offense you're bringing to the table. Like, you have to do absolute damage like you did last year, but it ended up being, them going all the way down to a 7th seed and them losing to the Chiefs in the first round. Like, I think for me, I think there was a 6th seed actually. But anyway, I think for me, with this Dolphins team, like they have to prove that they're like a legit team. And I think they have a chance to do it this year, especially with the guys that they have and that roster that they have, especially when they got Jordan Poyer in free agency. Like, they still have a good defense, and their offensive line is good. Teron Armstead is there. He's one of the best left tackles in football. Like, there's a lot to like about this team. And I think when you put those pieces together, like, they should do damage this year, but it just depends on if it actually holds up by the end of the year is what the thing is. Because they're just going to run the table in the regular season. It just depends on whether they're actually like playoff ready and are able to face these big teams in hostile environments later on in the season.
I think what's interesting about Miami is they can they can just be good early months of the season. But when it comes to December, when it comes to January, it just seems like production drops off. And for me, that has to be something Miami solves this year. Make it or break it year for them playoff-wise. But something that's interesting is, how does Trevor Lawrence come out and play? Because he's got a new player in Brian Thomas Jr., who should be a stud. It's an interesting matchup, because realistically, the Dolphins should run the table on offense, especially because this game's in Hard Rock Stadium. Now, we know the advantage that Miami has when playing at Hard Rock Stadium, but it's an interesting game because the Jaguars get to travel closely, which I think should make this game good. I could see this game being 24-17 or even 28-24, because when you don't have to travel is the biggest thing in the league. And to start a week 1 game off where you have to really go down the road, not literally, but not too far, I think this could play well into the Jaguars' hands. And you look at the Jaguars over time, they've had a past couple years of up and down, Play good, play bad. Play good. And they made it to a playoff game against the Chiefs. They almost won that. But last year was inexcusable. You're top of that AFC playoff race and you drop off. I think that's concerning, but these two teams have something to prove. And it's interesting to see which quarterback wants to put their team on their back and show what they got. I think it comes down to everything. Now, what do you have for a playoff or a score prediction?
I think for me, I agree with your 28-24 score, but I think it's going to be in the Dolphins' favor. I think, Tua is going to dot guys like Tyreek Hill and Waddle and OBJ if he's healthy for that game. So I think they win that game for sure.
Oh yeah. Now we got 3 more games to highlight here. One, I don't know if you can tell the shirt. I'm gonna keep flashing this thing, but the Arthur Smith quote unquote revenge game. We got Steelers Falcons. I think that's gonna be one of the most interesting games. What do you see playing out there? There's a lot to digest.
A lot to digest. And I think first I'll say that this matchup is really two teams that kind of faltered last year, especially with the amount of talent that they had. And, you look at the Steelers, their defense is always great. And then you add a guy like Patrick Queen to the mix. Like, that's incredible. And then you, weirdly enough, get Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, who are both real starting quarterbacks in the NFL still. And you start Russell Wilson in that position. I don't know if that's the right decision, I think. But I think if they're just going to use Justin Fields as a running quarterback, off of a third down and short play, you could do that. But I just don't know if Russ is that guy anymore. I was a big Russ guy, especially when he was in Seattle. You could say, he was carried by Legion of Boom, this, that, and the third, whatever. But he was still a really good quarterback, and I think he still can be. It's just when he was in Denver, it was an absolute dumpster fire with how he played within that scheme and that offense, especially with, having 2 coaches in 2 years, basically with, why am I blanking on his name? The Jets offensive coordinator now.
I can't think of it either.
What? That's it's the easiest name in the book, and it just all of a sudden just flew out of my mind.
When you bad as an offensive coordinator when you're not remembered.
Yeah, for sure. But when you look at a guy like him, and
he's doing his research over there now. He's got to think.
I'm looking. Nathaniel Hackett. That's who it is. Oh my God. See, now we're even. He messed up on one name. I messed up on one. We're good. We're even now. So Nathaniel Hackett, and when you're in that scheme with Hackett and Sean Payton, those are 2 really good offensive coaches, but it just didn't mesh with how that team looked, and it kind of showed. And coming into a new change of scenery with a guy like Mike Tomlin, who's more of a defensive-minded coach, I think it's just a question of where is this team's identity coming from? I think is my biggest question. Is do they want to be a good team, or do they want to be an 8-9, 9-8 team like they are pretty much every season and just barely scrape into the playoffs by the skin of their teeth? Is that what your identity needs to be, or is your identity to get all these great players together and just light the world on fire and shock the world? Because they have the guys to do it, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, T.J. Watt, Cam Hayward, Patrick Weed, and that secondary is great too. Minka's back there too. So they have so many players on that defensive side of the ball. It's just that offense needs to figure something out and win games for them to be a double-digit win team.
I love this game for many reasons, not just for Pittsburgh. There's a lot of fun stuff that is going to happen. I like to see how Zach Robinson is going to use these weapons of Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how they'll get going. They'll have a veteran quarterback in Kirk Cousins, and it'll be very fun to see how that offense functions under former Bengals coach Zach Robinson, who is very good. And, Raheem Morris as a head coach for that defense. You get Judon. You get Justin Simmons to revamp.
Nasty. My God, that defense is
there's a lot of interesting storylines coming out of this game that we could make a whole podcast within itself because there's just too much to go on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to show my bias, as crazy as it sounds, but I think the Steelers pull this out 21-17. We got to get some Minka magic this game. He just didn't get any turnovers last year, but this is the time he turns up. We were going to do 2 more games, but we got to wrap it up with one more here. And we're going to cover the Rams-Lions games. I know everybody wants that. Back at Ford Field, Matthew Stafford coming back again. It's like last year's playoff game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be another deja vu. And to go back to Steelers, Falcons, I think my score is going to probably be like 28-21 Falcons. I think they have a better offense.
I can see that happening, realistically.
Although that defense is really good for Pittsburgh, like I mentioned, that offense is good as well, and that can complement that. So we'll see if that actually does come to fruition. But yeah, about this Lions-Rams game, like I think it's going to be another deja vu of last year to where, like, Lions, I think, to me, are still the better team in this matchup, although Rams are still really good. Stafford, Nakua, Kupp. Higbee's still on that team, I believe. Or I could be wrong. I think he's actually on Titans now. Could be wrong. But, yeah, I think with the Rams, what you look at is, like, this team has a really good core nucleus of guys that can really take them to new heights. But I think when you look at a team like the Lions, too, like, there's a reason they were in the NFC Championship last year, and they're, in my opinion, going to repeat that type of run that they had last year because Jared Goff, like, really came into his own in that offense. Because you had a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's ridiculous as per usual. And then you got Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery as the running backs by committee who can get it done for you whenever you need them to. There's a lot to like about this Lions team. I think I have them winning this game. Let's go 34-23. I think that's what it's going to turn out to be. Yeah, that should be a really, really fun game, especially Sunday night, too.
Under the lights at Ford Field. I'm big on the Lions winning this game, too. I personally feel like Jameson Williams will actually come out year 3 and show the world, like, yeah, he really is that guy. That's why they took him so early when they did. And if Jameson Williams can be that wide receiver, too, this offense is going to go to new levels, new heights. I shouldn't say new heights because Bleacher Report might come after me after that.
Well, but I said it first. They might come after me first.
But having an offense of Goff who can be a game manager in a good way. Right. You have a guy like Gibbs and Montgomery duo in the backfield, but to have Amon-Ra finally have a guy like Jameson Williams hopefully break out, it will take that offense to another level. And that defense picked up, Terry and Arnold. They have Ennis Rakestraw Jr. in that secondary to revamp it as well. And I have the Lions taking this game. I just believe that Dan Campbell is going to have this team ready to go again after last year's success. Hopefully he doesn't crash, but you can't expect that with a guy like Dan Campbell, especially with a team like this. I got the Lions winning this in a 17-14 win, though. I think it's going to be a close game. I can't count out the Rams. It's just I could see the Rams as good as they're not anymore by national media standards. The Rams can put up a fight, especially with Matt Stafford, Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams, and the Michigan boy, Blake Corum. It's going to be a close game. I think the defenses are both going to come prepared. So that's my pick in the Lions. But I got to give a shout out to my boy here, Rome. Thank you for coming on to the show today. I appreciate you. We got to have you back on soon. But I appreciate you coming on to the show. Any last thoughts to wrap anything up?
Yeah, man. Thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate it. Glad we have this connection, my guy, and excited to see where you take this thing, man. I'm excited.
I'm excited for you, too.
Thank you.
Before we leave, plug that racing podcast. If you're into F1, we got to get that out there for you.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Starting Grid podcast, me and my guy Shane Holcomb, we're big F1 guys. We've been following sport for a couple years now. We're geeks at this stuff. So Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe, follow, leave us a review. It means the world to us. We're just doing it as a fun thing. So we just love F1. And if you guys love F1 too, come join us. It's a great community. So that's been fun as well. Of course, like you mentioned, follow me at RomeKDTV and RomeJacob1, where you can catch, some of my content. But also, if I'm doing a play-by-play broadcast, you could catch that as well soon. So yeah, a lot of fun stuff coming up. But yeah, that's all I got, man.
Oh yeah, I appreciate you Thanks for coming on. We're going to log off. Peace.